Welcome to Rooted in God's Love, the masterclass series for Christian women who desire to feel the Father's unconditional love, get grounded in their true identity in Him, and courageously pursue their God-given purpose. I'm ALANA and I'm your host, and I use biblical truths and cognitive behavioral therapy to help women get really rooted in their identity in Christ, love who God created them to be, and wake up joyful every day living in their kingdom purpose. And I am very excited to introduce you to Tamra Andress. Tamra is the CEO and founder of Core Creative's Christian Women's Business Membership and Expert Coaching Program. She guided startup women-owned companies to $350,000 in revenue during COVID 2020. She's the host of the top 2.5% globally ranked Fit in Faith podcast, serving to illuminate, create, and activate God-centered women within the faith and business sector to propel kingdom impact. She was additionally featured as the top 500 global influencer list by Brains magazine alongside Gary Vaynerchuk and Mel Robbins. She's a wife and mama of two, as well as a certified ordained minister, international retreat host, and author. Welcome, Tamra. I'm so honored to have you here today.
Thank you so much. It's such a joy. And I love that that's a part of this conference. And I hope that in the midst of it, everyone can just feel that above all things that come out of my mouth. So that would be my prayer, that by the end of it, you sense joy, you feel joy, and you are and become joy in everything that you do. So I'm honored to share this space with you. Thank you so much.
Oh, that's beautiful. I love that. And I know today we're going to talk about something that to some people might sound very counterintuitive, and it's basically the painful road to purpose. And before we dive into the topic, Tamara, can you tell us a little bit about your story? Like what brought you to the point of doing the work you do now?
Absolutely. And honestly, pain is a part of it. It's what rooted me into a place of having to uproot everything that I knew to be normal. And so I was born and raised in Virginia Beach, Virginia. I won't give you the full backstory because we'd be here forever. But I have always been a bred beach babe and started into my entrepreneurial journey very early, from speaking and being in student government and things like that when I was younger, to actually creating a business plan that was around maternity and newborn, both fitness and nutrition and boutique fashion world in college. And from there, ended up jumping right into my entrepreneurial journey. I did something called Beauty in the Beach, which is why I mentioned that, which was one of the first things that generated revenue. And I got to train right here on the ocean side. It was an amazing time. And it was alongside my mom, which is really special. And our story too has come full circle since this season. And so not only was I doing that, we opened a boutique. I was also getting married in the season. I was working at a Fortune 500 during that season. I ended up having kiddos, and I got approached by an international investor who had a nursing bra company from Australia. They just walked into my store one day. So at the time, I really wasn't in my faith. I always believed in God, but didn't really know anything or have a relationship directly with Jesus Christ. And so they came in and I was like, oh, yep, I'm doing this, and took it in my own control to say yes to another opportunity, which ended up putting me into 60, 70-hour work weeks. I'm an Enneagram 3. If you know anything about Enneagrams, that's the achiever, and therefore moving at a million miles a minute every given moment, while having a 1 and 2-year-old at home and my husband. And so obviously there was a bound and imminent crash and burn that was going to happen. And what and where that was going to happen, I didn't really know, but I knew that I was using a lot of coping mechanisms that I didn't know what their roots were at the time, whether it was alcohol and being able to suppress anxiety, whether it was things within my sexual life that weren't positive and weren't fueling my marriage, or whether it was just avoiding what I knew was a calling of motherhood, but feeling like I was doing something greater by providing a financial legacy, which I never had. So that crash and burn looked like me pulling into my driveway one day and recognizing that my barely waddling 10-month-old who had just finished nursing didn't come to me after I'd been gone for nearly 12 hours. She waddled back over to daddy. And I was just like, oh, wait a second. This isn't me. This isn't what I want. That really hurt me. And there could have been 1,000 other things that really woke me up. And there was surely moments after that, conversations of divorce, conversations of losing my children, conversations of money struggles. I ended up going to therapy. I ended up potentially wanting to commit suicide and having that mindset. And so many things led to my being at the feet of Jesus. And in that moment, he lifted my chin from not being able to make eye contact with people around me to being able to look and gaze into his beautiful face. And I'll never forget that moment. I remember the 3-hour conversation that took place with who I call my fairy godmother and my husband. And they told me by the end of the conversation, I looked different, that there was a light about me, that there was shoulders that were held high, that I was able to make eye contact. And they knew in that moment that I had really met Jesus as I had said that I did, and that it wasn't a lie, which was something that was white lies that compounded to many, many lies of my life, wearing masks that weren't mine, striving for perfectionism and achievement. So I hope in one of those grandiose situations, you found a mirror of yourself. Because there's been a lot of struggle, and it ended up finding out that I was rooted in a sexual trauma that occurred when I was 3 years old, that I had suppressed so much that I didn't know existed, with a child that was much older than me and also had a mental handicap. And therefore I just hid it and I suppressed it because I couldn't tell on him. And if I did, what did that become of me? And so a lot of issues around like cyber sex when I was younger, masturbation, different things like that ended up falling out. Y'all, I'm just putting it all on the table. So I hope you're
Yeah,
ready
and
for
you know
this.
what? I love that authenticity because I think you're talking about things that most people hide. Most people have shame and guilt around these things. And I love that you're putting them out there because somebody listening right now, they're going, wow, she's telling my story. I'm not alone in what I'm experiencing, right? Most people won't talk about sexual trauma and masturbation and the after effects of it, right? Which none of it was your fault. It's just the human nature. It's what we do sometimes, right? And I love that you're sharing about all of this. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you feel isolated in that, I'm definitely the person to come to. I would love to just pray over you and have a conversation. So know that I'm an open book in that regard. I actually had an opportunity to co-author a book all around different areas like this. There's 24 women who are partnering in their own storylines. And so you have access to that book. It's called She Writes for Him, Stories of Resilient Faith, which is exactly what you're gathering here with this conference and this masterclass for people. So I think it's really beautiful. I think overall, let's kind of shift gears a bit so that you guys can not only find yourself in your story, but really own the pain that has existed in your own life. And so with all of that, I had options, I had choices, I had opportunities. You know, God gives us free will. I could have stayed rooted in that place of destruction, in that place of hardship. And I also could have taken that as a place of identity. And I think I had a choice in that. And I'm really grateful that God said, no, like this is who you are. And it took a lot of work. It took me showing up to church broken every single Sunday, every single Wednesday, every single conference, every single worship opportunity. I ended up actually getting my ordination and minister's license during a 2-year program where I ended up quitting everything else. So both of those CEO positions were gone. I became a full-time stay-at-home mom, and that's very hard for the Enneagram 3. And I struggled with it. I'm like, this is the identity that I want on my tombstone. I want it to say she was a good wife and a good mom and a good servant. And yet I'm struggling in this name tag. Why is this? And so I ended up doing that ordination minister's license as a way of getting out, but also a way of looking up. And it really rooted me in that time in a beautiful way as I uprooted all of those things that I spoke about previously. So the conversation here is around our painful road to purpose. So how in the midst of all of that muck, how was I able to turn that mess into a message? How was I able to turn that pain into purpose? And it was through a multitude of layered things, but ultimately, instead of living my life through the rear view mirror, I started living through the windshield. And I think this is where we get messed up. We watch our parents learn to drive. And I remember sitting in the back seat, and I have a 6 and 7-year-old now who will pretend like they're driving, and I'll follow their gauge, and only in neighborhoods, of course, or parking lots where it's safe. But they think that it's hilarious because they're mirroring us, right? And so I mirrored the understanding of how do I live my life? And I mirrored it obviously through the lens of my parents, who I love dearly and were doing their best with what they had been given. But there was a lot of brokenness in that. And so I started mirroring that in my life later. Then later I get my driver's license. You guys have gotten yours, hopefully, likely. And in that time, you're like, oh my gosh, it feels so good to be free. I want to go anywhere and everywhere that I possibly can. And that road for me looked like away from Jesus. It looked like away from my faith. It looked like away from home for a while when I was in college. But ultimately, it led me back to my roots. It led me back to the very neighborhood I grew up. Me and my husband actually bought a house and rented a house in the space that I was 17 houses down. And we know biblically, leave and cleave is very important. And it took me into this specific season where I got to identify what that meant, taking away the mirroring from my fleshly parents and turning it to my Father in heaven. That mirroring example of becoming, and this is something I always say, is that we are always becoming. That perfectionism that I strive for, the mask that I wore, it wasn't real. It's not real. It's not attainable here on earth. I honestly think that it's only owned by God and Jesus himself. Even in heaven, when we're supposed to, have that air of perfection, we're really just still going to be standing at the right hand of perfection. And so now, after giving him back the keys and letting Jesus take the wheel, which we talked about before, we still often want to take control. We still try to be like, hey, why don't you just navigate and I'll get in the driver's seat again. And that too, even in the last 5-6 years, has shown up in many ways because it's in our flesh, and it's also exampled every single day by other people, whether it's through success, whether it's through motherhood, whether it's through the lens of your marriage. And I realized ultimately that if I lived my life looking in the rearview mirror, it ended up taking over the entire vision of my life. That could have been my identity. That could have been where I consistently was shackled. That could have been where I lived every single day. But the choice is greater, and it's actually already before you. That windshield, that mirror moment where you're looking ahead to what God has promised. If you let him take the driver's seat, if you sit in submission, submission is victory after all. And that's in every area of your life. I submitted my entrepreneurial desires. I submitted my marriage. I submitted my motherhood. I submitted my daughtership to my own parents. I let go of those relationships in order to understand my relationship with the Lord. And that was such a difficult season of my life, to feel completely trapped and isolated away from the people that I loved deeply, but I knew were negative influences on my life at the time. And so here we are in the car with Jesus. And so my question to you during this time is, where are you sitting? What control are you trying to take? Are you the child in the back emulating Jesus? That's where I strive to be every single day. Are you trying to navigate? Are you using that choice, that free will, to point and tell him where to go? Or are you sitting in the driver's seat, trying to take ownership over the things that you think you deserve, the places that you never want to go again, you're driving away from? I can assure you that every piece of your pain, every part of your rearview mirror, he uses for good. Literally to the point where those cyber sex chat rooms that I was a part of, and found myself in dial-up internet and AOL in the middle of the living space that we lived in, right in front of my parents. These chat rooms that tried to take my purity, and did. These chat rooms with people where sex trafficking is everything that it is now. I didn't know what that meant. And at the time, it was truly that. They were trying to get my address. They were trying to find out my phone number. Sometimes I'd give my phone number. And so understanding that these things happen in pure light, not just in the dark, and yet God still uses them even when they're painful. So now I have this incredible opportunity through entrepreneurship, motherhood, marriage, all of these things, in something called Clubhouse. If you've never heard of it, it's a new app that just came out, and it's audio chat rooms. And I remember the first day I got on, and I was listening to everybody, and I was just receiving, and there's no text there. There's no video. There's tiny, tiny little pictures of people, but there's no comparison in that regard, as I was being redeemed. He was restoring something that happened decades ago. And I never, ever knew or thought that that would be possible. And yet he makes all things possible. And so what questions do you have? I mean, that's my heart. My heart is for you guys to know that he's there. And every single moment you have an opportunity, if you need, to go back to the place that you asked him why, go back to the place that you asked him where were you, God? He shows up and he proves to you in the now and in your windshield that he is present.
Well, and I think so much of what you said is so powerful. And I think that's where a lot of women struggle is they think, where were you, God? When this was happening to me, I don't understand why you would allow that. So then they lose their trust and faith in him. They might think that they have trust and faith in him because they're like, I go to church, I read my Bible, but deep down, there's this root of, I don't fully trust you. And when we don't fully trust God, that's a disconnect from him. We can't fully align with him or abide in him when we don't trust him. So I think that's really powerful. And I'm curious because you talked a lot about perfectionism and striving, which I think is a huge thing for so many women. Like they do, right? They're validated by what they do. They're affirmed by what they do. So how did you get to a place of like striving, perfectionism, doing to a place of always becoming?
That's so good. I love that question. I think ultimately it was in that understanding of submission and knowing that I was going to lose it all if I kept trying to do something that was not possible, and still letting go of every single thing that I take on. We just talked about that offline before we got on, is the recognition that it's in our flesh to desire to make things well, not only for ourselves, not only for our mirror, but for the highlight reels, for the comparison factors. There's so many things that are happening on a supersonic speed, and we want to make it right. And yet at the same time, it's in our weakness that he gets to show up and he gets that glory. And so as I stepped into entrepreneurship after that 3-year hiatus from all things besides being present in my home, present in my mind, and present in my body, and present with Jesus himself, I looked around and I saw with new lens. And that lens was a lens of empathy versus sympathy. Before, it was the looking back or looking over top of people and be like, I have sympathy that you're not here yet. Now it's, I see you. I understand where you're at. And I promise you too can get there. I promise purpose exists within you. I promise the pain is worth it. And so it's just that different lens and that different heart set and that desire to not financially reward myself. That part didn't really matter at that point. It was more so just this overflow that God had given me that I wanted to share with other people. And that's how Fit and Faith podcast emerged. That's how women's retreats emerged. I just so desperately wanted the deposit that was given to me to be given to others. And it's a beautiful thing how he allows our overflow and our ignite to be the flame that other people need to start their fire.
Yeah, so well said. And I love that that's your mission now, because it's like the comfort that he comforted you with, you now get to comfort others with, which is so beautiful. And so, you talk a lot about surrender, which I think is so powerful, because a lot of us, we don't want to surrender. I even know when I first became a Christian 12 years ago, I was 30 years old. And I was terrified to let anyone take the wheel in my life. I was like, I've got most of it figured out. I don't know if I trust fully that someone else is going to be able to do this. And I remember just crying like, okay, God, I'm going to try this out. I'm going to trust you. And it was hard to let go of that control. And that was probably my first lesson in surrender. And it's just gone deeper and deeper over the years. So what would you say to the woman who is scared? She doesn't fully trust God. She doesn't know if he's going to be able to do a good job with her life. Even though he says it, there's this disconnect of trust because of her past, because of trauma. What would you say to that woman to help her understand the benefits, the beauty of surrender?
You know what? I think this is probably a countercultural Christian thing to say, but God, give me the words, make sure it's the right thing. I'm going to say to challenge him. He is okay with your disbelief. He is okay with your fear. He is okay with your lack of faith. We only need a mustard seed, right? This much. And he will come and rise to the occasion, because that's what he does best. And so there's two things. One, question him and challenge him and say, God, I hear you. I believe you. I'm reading your word. I'm praying at your feet. And I know what you're saying to be true, but I don't see it. Let him show you. Show him, ask him, tell him what you need, and he will rise to that occasion. And the second thing is to make sure that you are staying rooted in the why behind your desire. Is it out of flesh? Is it out of comparison? Is it out of perfectionism? Because if it is, he's going to shake you with an answer that you may be surprised by. And so making sure that that surrender space that you're existing in is through the lens of him, through the lens of who you are as a daughter of the king. And imperfection in that is okay because he is the I am. And if we can use that affirmation, I am, and we can say that every single day with confidence because he is within us, literally, he lives within you and he exists. His purpose is your purpose. And that is to go and tell the world about who he is and how he shows up in your life. So if you need further evidence, go for it. I can't wait to hear how he responds because every single time that I have doubt, he tells me and he shows me and he rocks the boat a little bit and he still challenges me right back. And generally speaking, he's already given me the confirmation and the affirmation that I need, but it's in my doubt, it's in my flesh that I don't activate. So he's likely, friend, already called you out of the boat and you're sitting there saying, are you sure I can walk on water? Are you sure that this is the right season for me to do it? It's pretty stormy out there. And yet he's the one already standing on the water. He's exempling. If you're going to mirror someone, mirror him.
Yes, absolutely. 100%. And that's so beautiful because a lot of times we will look at the wind and the waves around us. We won't look to Jesus. And when we look to Jesus, we can walk on water, right? We're mirroring him. When we're looking at the wind and the waves, we sink, right? And it's such a beautiful picture of what happens in our lives when we're not really tuned into him. And, I love what you say about questioning him and challenging him. And then with the other point, what would you say to a woman who, she wants that discernment. She wants to trust her intuition and that God is leading her in that right direction and that she is doing it from a place of not striving, not perfectionism, but really living in the Holy Spirit that is within her, right? His spirit within her. What would you say to her as far as having that discernment to be able to tell, is this from God or is it not from God?
It's a great question. One thing before I jump right to that is the wind and the wave. I told you I was a beach girl, so this is a perfect case of circling back to that concept for you guys to look with new lens at the wind and the waves that are currently in your life, whether that's physically or spiritually or emotionally or mentally. There is a steadfastness to the waves. There is an ever evolving presence to the wind. And he is in that. And so what can look like fear can actually immediately, with a click of a finger, turn into assurance, can turn into the promise that he is present even still. So abide in the steadfast endurance of the ocean, of the waves, and keep going, keep pressing in to experience it. It's ever changing. When I became a Christian, my life didn't get easier. The waves didn't go away. I wasn't living in the lake zone, right? And so just really activating in the understanding that the ever evolving storm that might surround you. And I got married in the midst of the storm. So there's been so many analogies and puns that have come to play since then. But all that rain that everyone said was going to be a multitude of babies. There's a multitude of babies, all right. They're like little business babies. And I love them so much, working for the kingdom. And it's so beautiful. So to answer your question, that gut instinct, whether they're doubting it, whether they can feel it or sense it or not, God talks to all of us in so many different ways. He speaks to me through visual lens. And so when I'm praying, he actually shows me pictures, little snapshots of either my future or my present or what's to come or what his response is in that time. And so it's not this audible thing. And he also comes by surrounding you and affirming you through the people who are connected to you. And so it's really important for you to analyze your inner circle. I told you how to get rid of people who I absolutely love. And luckily have had the gift of bringing them back into my life when my boundaries and my strongholds were in him rather than in the world and they were fickle. And I wasn't receiving things with a negative lens or anger or deposits that were causing other things. So look at your inner circle. Are the people there building you up? Are they affirming you in the dreams that God has laid on your heart, on the gifts and the talents that he's already deposited within you? You don't have to strive to find purpose. It's already there. And I do a really fun activity with people. And I say fun, It's analyzing your pain. So it's fun for me because I know the outcome, but in the
Yeah.
process, it's not always that fun. It's analyzing your pains and writing them all down, and then analyzing your passions and writing them all down. Everything from I love to sew to I love to read to I love to speak, to I love bright colors, to the pain points of everything that I listed prior to at the beginning of this. And then we get to make this amazing thing called a journey map. And you get to see the highs and lows of your life. And you get to find this beautiful thing in the middle that I believe is the silver lining, that I know is the silver lining, that is God, that ever present line, that ever present wave, that ever present wind, right? And so in that, purpose exists. And so whether you're 15 or you're 55 or you're 95, your story matters. Your pain has purpose. Every low is going to be counteracted with a high. And he's going to reignite those places of passion in such a way you never thought. So don't feel like you have to niche. If you're thinking about your purpose in the space of entrepreneurship, don't think that you have to take one thing and do that one thing. God uses all things. So if you like to speak and you love to sew and you like bright colors, like you can do this, okay?
Yeah.
And know that it's for you and he is there. So whether he's speaking to you through prayer, whether he's affirming you through your inner circle and you're making sure that you are being good at fine-tooth combing that inner circle, and or he's doing it through the word. He will literally illuminate words, scripture, stories, parables, books of the Bible if you ask him to. So put him to the test. I told you, challenge him. Say, God, what do you want me to learn today? What do you want to say to me today? What can you say? And what can I learn from you, from your word, from your steadfast, alive word? Let me open it up to the right scripture today. And it will always speak to you. And I assure you that there is purpose in that moment. And so let that affirmation be the confirmation of your gut instinct. I don't discredit the fact that the world has taken so many of the secular concepts and they've skewed what was biblically rooted, things like manifestation, things like meditation, things like yoga, things like gut instincts, or the gut being the main brain. I don't discredit that because I think that there's a lot of truth to it. And you having the background that you do in behavioral therapy, I'm sure you have a lot of science that meets a lot of Jesus. And he exists in those things. Manifestation is in the Bible, y'all. Meditation is biblical. It's biblical words. You can look them up. And so practices that you think are meant for the world are actually meant for you. And so a gut alignment, that vertical knowing of who you are, he can deposit right into that space. If it doesn't feel right, it's probably not right. If it feels really good and it's the right thing, you know, the angel and the devil, I'm imagining that right now as I'm talking to you. You guys have to steward what you've been given really well. And at every given moment, when you hear any enemy, and that enemy can be in your own head that you're self-creating, that negative self-talk, that I'm not worthy, that I'm not beautiful, that I'm not called. Yes, you are. We all are, uniquely and divinely. So stand within that authority, stand within that I am, and activate your purpose. Activating your purpose isn't sitting in the boat. It's jumping into the ocean. Ready? Come do it with me. I do this all the time. I go retreats worldwide. We're going to Costa Rica next February. So I want people to get out of the boat, get out of your comfort zone. Nothing happens in the comfort zone except for death.
Yeah. 100%. Yes, absolutely. And I mean, it's such a powerful word, everything that you're speaking, because it really all comes back to how rooted are we in him? Because even the things that you mentioned that, you know, before I became a Christian, I was very into the new age belief system, right? The law of attraction and the secret and all of those things. And so what I realized recently as I was kind of teasing that out, like what parts of those were rooted in biblical principles, and almost everything is, it's just the fact that people have taken Jesus Christ out of it. They've taken God out of it. So when we're rooted and grounded in him, we have the potential to be able to discern, I think, even better what is of him and what's not of him. And if something doesn't feel right, like if we're in a yoga class and they're doing some things that just don't align. We know that maybe the exercise portion of it is good, but the spiritual aspect doesn't align with us because we're so rooted in our identity and worth in Him that we're not finding it in the world. We're not finding it with that bright, shiny object that we see. We're so focused on Him, right?
It's so true, and it's so powerful. And again, it's that lens of discernment. It doesn't mean that you can't partake in those types of experiences, but you have to be really rooted. And ultimately, that's what this entire masterclass is what all of this is about. A part of my journey in that was taking back the identity of my body and understanding the purpose of me being a woman and what that looks like in the intimate confounds of my bedroom with my husband. And so I was go to the gym, which I had previously told you, I used to personal train people. So my body meant something that was used as a tool, was purposed based on the gift of a man, right? And I am for them, not I am beautiful in and of myself. And beauty has even transformed so beautifully since God has gotten a hold of my heart. And so I would go to the gym, and I was newly in my faith, and I was listening to the words. And I had to already turn and cut everything off. So what is being deposited into your spirit that is adjusting your gut? So you're listening to the right things. Are you watching with your eyes the right things? Are you Netflixing all day long? Because I promise you that's not good. Are you watching The Bachelorette every single time it comes on? Not good for your love life. Promise you that. What else is happening? What are you reading? What are you saying? What's coming out of your mouth? And so I go to the gym, and there's these crazy songs that are on, things that I used to like, go to the club to, right? And I love that you came to your faith in your 30s, because I was 29. And so I lived a life, right? I told you I drove my car, and I was like, bye, mom, when I went to college. And I lived the college lifestyle. And so I've experienced a lot of things. And I am so grateful that God turned those good. But as I heard those words, I'm like, this is really sad. This is where that empathy came into play versus sympathy. This is so sad that our entire world is listening to music like this. That since a very young age, I was taught that my body was not meant for me, it was meant for a man. That I was being viewed through this lens. MTV, was something that came out in my childhood, and I watched these women dance. And I hear these grown women who are beautiful moms, beautiful spouses in ministry, maybe not, teachers, nurses, all of these incredible, beautiful roles. And they're saying these words to themselves. And I'm thinking, yes, you're here and you're working out, and that is rad. And I believe in physical being, and I believe in moving your body. But you're also depositing in your spirit words of the enemy, and it's breaking you. And you don't know it because it happens so subtly. And so I safe harbor my children from things like this. The things that I was never safe harbored from because my mom and dad didn't know. They didn't think about that stuff. Plus, they didn't have music like that when they were younger. Yes, we listened to a lot of country. So thank you for Reba McEntire and all the other things that we listen to in our home. But even country is criminal. And I just want you guys to be really cognizant of every single deposit that's happening. And it happens everywhere that you go. So I sound sometimes like a prude when I say it out loud, but I had to cut off all secular music. I had to cut off all secular TV. I listen and watch Pure Flix and things like Chosen that just came out. Season 2 is coming out soon. So if you've never seen it, it's life-changing. I teach my children from biblical stories. We listen to audibles on the car ride. They're young. And so I'm seeing what school, and luckily they're not in a public school. We're grateful to have them in an independent setting, but it's the knowing that even there, the enemy is sneaking his way in. And so I have to now be responsible for the things that they're listening to, the things that they're watching, the things that they're saying. And we recently, this is a perfect example, my sweet little 6-year-old, she said, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. I'm like, true. And then she said the other saying, which is about, oh goodness, it's going to elude me because we changed it to something positive. Shucks, that's going to drive me crazy. I can't think of it. Anyway, I had to change what was a common day thing that people said back in the day into an entire mindset shift for her to talk about giving. And it was a rhyme that was rooted in evil deceit of not being kind to each other. I can't believe I can't think of it. But anyway, we changed it. We did these like heart motions, and we talked about giving and living her life for love. And now I know that for the rest of her life, she's going to have a shield. She's going to have a weapon that these other kids didn't have because I'm giving her a tool. And you have access to these tools through the word, through Christian music, through the church, through communities in that inner circle, all of these things that I've mentioned. But that takes work, right? I don't drink. I haven't drank for 2 years almost, me and my husband. And I was never an alcoholic, but alcoholism runs it deep within my family. And I remember living through the lens of secular, my kids coming up to me and being like, "What's that, mommy? Can I have that?" And we live a very health conscious home. And I say, no. Why is something I'm putting in my body not something that my children can put into theirs? And why is it a mommy drink? And moms and margs and mommy needs a beverage. I don't want my kids to think that I am using this as an outlet or a coping mechanism, which my coping mechanisms are what broke me. And so talk about surrender. Y'all, I stopped getting invited to things because we didn't go and do stuff like that anymore. And it does sound prude, but it's not. It's protecting. It's protecting the pain that I went through and the purpose that I exist in. Hopefully you guys, are you hearing my jet that's flying by right now?
Is that your jet?
No, I wish it was my jet. I'm going to manifest the jet. Yes, it's my jet. My husband's giving me sloop-de-doos in the sky. No, we live next to Air Force bases and in the military town with lots of bases. So they constantly like to fly on pretty days. But yeah, you have to protect yourself. You just have to safe harbor. I'm being protected right now, right, by our Air Force. And I'm grateful for that. So look through the lens of himself. Look through the lens of the I am. Look through the lens of the Bible. It's not prude, it's protective.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love what you say about deposits, because we do sometimes what we watch, what we listen to, all of it has an effect on us in so many ways. Like we could talk about that for hours, the impact that those things have. And I know I have a 5-year-old daughter, and we often listen to Christian music in the car. And she sings those lyrics. We get home and she's singing these songs, and she has her little CD in her room with kids' Christian songs, and she's singing Jesus Loves Me and all of these other things. And it's beautiful because all of those things are going deep inside her, right? If she was listening to, I remember once I saw a little child outside in the neighborhood, 5 or 6-year-old boy was singing that song that came out. It was a few years ago, and it was, I'm suicidal, suicidal. And he's singing these lyrics, and I'm like, oh, like something
yes.
did not sit well with me, because I thought, oh my goodness, like he doesn't know what he's saying. And even those words, the power of our words, like I've studied this man named Dr. Masaru Emoto, who studies water crystals. Like he takes pictures of water crystals as they form in different environments and with different words spoken over them. And when these water crystals have words of love and prayer spoken over them, they look like beautifully formed snowflakes under the microscope. But when they're spoken over with, I hate you, you're ugly, they're all broken apart. And it's awful to see, because we're made up of 70% water. So those words that we say to ourselves, whether they're words of life or not, whether they're scripture or not, they're going to have an effect on us. And what do we want, not only ourselves and our body and our makeup to be, but also what we're putting out there in the world? Because I even notice sometimes when, somebody will go out, like my husband will go out and he'll be around different people, and he'll come home and all of a sudden I'll hear him swear a few times. And I'm like, who were you with that was swearing? And he's like, what do you mean? Right. And he never swears. So it's weird when he does. And I always know he's been around people who were swearing, because we don't even realize how quickly we can be invaded with the influence of other people or other things in our life. So 100% agree with you on that. I love that.
Yeah, that's a perfect example. I partner with you in that. My husband is in the contracting world. And so you can only imagine he has an amazing team and inner circle for his business around him. But of course, he's going all the different places. And it's wild to see those deposits again from our children, from our spouses, from our family members. And that's why protection is so important. And, you wouldn't get in a car, just to go back to that example, you wouldn't get in a car that had 300,000 miles and had only one door and no seat belts and get on the highway, right? And so that's what you're doing. You are arming yourself with a dilapidated piece of equipment when you go and you do these things and you allow these deposits in your life. And so I know a part of like being with conversationalists like you, Alana, is that we get deposits right now. We get convicted. You've probably had a gut instinct right now during this conversation. And so I would just encourage you to reflect back on that, to write about it, to journal it, to bring it to God. God, what does this mean for me? I did not just automatically decide one day, or nobody told me in the church to say, you're not supposed to drink. I don't go to a church like that. Pastors drink. It's cool. That's awesome. For me, it wasn't the right thing to do. And so I got convicted during a conversational podcast of a gal who was a colleague of mine, a longtime friend, who was like, we're just trying this out for a year. And I was like, I'm around alcoholics all the time and I drink. And I think that it'd be really cool to try something different. And so I did it one day. My husband took notice, never told him that I was going to do it. And he was like, you don't want a glass of wine? And I was like, no, not tonight. Not the next night. Not the next night. And he was like, all right. So when I said no, he said no. He mirrored me because he loves me, because he sees me, because he knows me through the trauma that we went through, through the therapy that we went through the deep communication that we've had. And almost 2 years later, we've never really had deep conversations about it. We've never said that we'll never not drink again. We just live our life in the healthiest version of who we are promised to be. And right now in this season, it looks like that. And so what does it look like for you right now? What thing is God convicting you to let go of? What thing is he saying, I'm going to turn that into your purpose. I'm going to turn that pain into a powerful place of passion. And it's going to be good. And you're going to be able to stand in it with authority. And you're going to be able to tell strangers about that brokenness, that place of shame and that place of guilt. Because it's just a tiny rear view mirror in your car. It's a part of you. It's not going away. But you just get to look at it in reflection mode in order to activate where you're going, where he has you planned for. And it's somewhere really, really good, friend. But you got to let him drive. You got to trust him, and you got to follow those intuitions because they do matter.
Yes. And it's interesting. I love your picture of the car, because I know when I get in my car later on today, I'm going to be thinking about all of these things.
Right, me too, y'all. My car paint is chipping. So don't let the jet analogy.
It's okay. You've got a jet. Who needs a car, right? So, and I know, you have blessed these women. I know you have, and I know you've given them a lot of food for thought, where they have these beautiful journaling questions. And I would encourage all of you watching to take those on, really sit there with the Lord today and journal about those things and see, what is he revealing to you? Because I promise you, when you are tuning into him, he will reveal things to you. So that was beautiful.
Thank you, Alana. Thank you for stewarding this calling, and for being within your own purpose and listening to the Holy Spirit. Because I know things like this from a coordination perspective and even from a diligence perspective are hard. It's hard, but you're showing up and you're showing out and you're showing these people that getting out of the boat can be safe and it can be fun and it can be enjoyable. So just keep being steadfast in your own waves and your own winds.
Beautiful. So thank you, Tamra. Thank you so much. This has been wonderful. I have so enjoyed you. And thank you, ladies, for paying attention and tuning in. And I do pray that you take some time to journal about what Tamra has shared with us. And I hope you all have a wonderful day, and we'll see you on the next masterclass series.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you for watching. If you connected with this content and it helped you in some way, please like, subscribe, and share this video. Also, check the description below for special gifts just for you. See you in the next video.